Okay, message to your younger self then, Wayne. So if you were, you know, a teenager again, or for teenagers now, what would you want to know about? I was going to say identity or racism, but they're both huge issues on their own, aren't they? But what message would have liked to have heard yourself to
Um,
support your growth?
okay. Um, do you mean in terms of social media generally, or just
Sorry, no,
about
sorry,
growing
not
up, kind of? Yeah.
yeah, growing up. So really, regarding sort of race and identity, really more
Mm,
so than social media. So
okay.
sorry, I didn't explain that very
All
well.
right.
So yeah, I think racism has changed over the years, but it's still here,
Mm,
and it has different forms and different guises, whether it's in institutions personally, or it's changed over the years. So since we were growing up to now
yeah.
where we are. But it's still here, and it's a shame that it's still here, but it's
Mm,
still here. Um, so if you were having to negotiate what you've had to negotiate in your past, if
I see.
what could have helped you if you'd have known at the time? I don't know if that
Okay.
makes sense
Yeah, it
also.
does. That makes perfect sense. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, so two things that spring to mind. The first one is not to dwell on discrimination. So whether it's around race or whether it's around disability or mental health or whatever it is that may apply to you in terms of what you might be discriminated for, I would say personally, try not to dwell on that. Allow yourself time and space to be able to, express yourself, but also allow yourself time and space to maximize any opportunities that arise for positive discrimination. And they do exist. I mean, they do shrink from time to time, and they might shrink depending on where you live or what you're involved in, but they certainly appear from time to time. And I would say maximize those opportunities. And as part of those opportunities, um, don't kind of forget where you came from in a way. So applying that rule to myself,
Mhm.
I've experienced racism like I'm sure a lot of people of color have, and I've tried not to dwell on that throughout my life. Although I have kind of dwelled on it at times. I've allocated space for that, but I've
Yeah.
conveyed what I've thought as well. But I've also tried to do something about it. And when the opportunities arose to actually do something, and just it might have warranted a bit more of my spare time, or it might have meant having a difficult conversation with someone that I could have been easier just to sit back and think, I'll not have this conversation. I've stepped up and I've done that, and I think it's important that people do that in whatever regard applies to them, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Mhm.
um, the next thing I would say is to be self-aware and recognize the ways that you can be easily labeled, stereotyped and categorized,
Mhm.
as well as your own inescapable racial bias. And I say that from the point of view that um, we're all shaped and influenced by white supremacy, for example. It's part of the everyday structures and systems of which we all live in. And just the media, one example, that will sort of depict and portray people of color in a certain way. And we can't say that we're not influenced by that. We're all influenced by that. So it's then how self-aware you are, I believe, and how aware you are of your surroundings as to how you can kind of, critically analyze and understand, oh, actually, I'm subscribing to this stereotype here. Because, all I've ever seen in the newspaper that I read every single day is that black people act or speak or function in a certain way. And I've
Mhm.
got a black person in front of me now, and it's very difficult to not push that kind of to frame that person in that way, if that makes sense. Just being very basic, I suppose, in that thinking. So yeah, self-awareness,
Yeah,
I think,
that's
is
it,
key.
isn't it? Important. No matter what background you're from, we all have bias, don't we, in one way
Yeah,
or another,
yeah,
and we are all influenced. So I think that's very, very true, and it's very good advice. You know, so and I think also, as you said about not dwelling, it doesn't mean that things don't have an impact, but they're not
mm,
going to stop and derail you, and you're going to still look for the positives, which
yeah.
I think has got to be the way forward, hasn't it?
I think so. Yeah, there's always hope.
Yeah.
Um, and I think if you lose hope, then really you lose everything. And part of that being self-aware, I guess, is trying to find the hope in your situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. That's my take on it.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's really nice to hear, and hopefully will be helpful to people, and I'm sure it will. It's interesting to hear your point of view. So thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks for having me.